The shot rang out in the middle of an otherwise ordinary event, the kind of university gathering that usually features debates, spirited exchanges, and the sort of tension that has come to define political dialogue on America's campuses. But what unfolded that day at Utah Valley University was unlike anything most in attendance had ever imagined. In an instant, a prominent national figure, a young father, and a Christian leader known to millions was struck down in the most public and violent way possible. Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA, was fatally shot in the neck during a live campus event, a tragedy that sent shockwaves across the country and reignited urgent conversations about the rising dangers faced by outspoken voices in an increasingly polarized era. The sheer suddenness of the attack left witnesses shaken, families broken, and a nation grappling with what this moment says about the times we are living in. Before we go further, it's important to pause here and remind readers that discussions like these depend on community support. So don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to the channel as we continue to explore this story in depth. The details of the shooting itself remain seared in the memory of those who were there. What was meant to be an opportunity for students to engage with Kirk's arguments and perspectives, part of a broader American comeback tour organized by Turning Point USA, instead descended into chaos and horror. According to early reports, the gunman fired from a distance, possibly a building more than 200 yards away, striking Kirk as he sat at his signature "prove me wrong" table during a question-and-answer session. Witnesses described scenes of panic as students scattered, some screaming, others trying desperately to help. Emergency responders rushed Kirk to the hospital, but the wound proved catastrophic. Within hours, news broke that he had not survived. The fact that a nationally known figure, only 31 years old, could be assassinated in broad daylight on an American university campus was not just a tragedy. It was a chilling reminder of how far hostility and hatred can spiral in today's cultural climate. To understand the magnitude of this event, one must consider the broader landscape in which Kirk operated. For more than a decade, he had positioned himself at the heart of contentious national conversations. Through Turning Point USA, he built a network of campus chapters across the country, mobilizing young conservatives, challenging progressive orthodoxies, and sparking debates that often drew large, passionate crowds. Kirk thrived in adversarial spaces, frequently walking onto campuses where he knew his message would be met with skepticism or outright hostility. His willingness to engage in debate, often face-to-face with students who opposed him, earned both admiration and resentment. To supporters, he embodied courage, a young man unafraid to speak unpopular truths. To critics, he symbolized a political movement they viewed as divisive. That his life ended in precisely this arena is bitterly symbolic, underscoring the risks that accompany public engagement in a hyperpolarized age. The immediate aftermath of the shooting revealed just how unprepared institutions are for this kind of violence in intellectual spaces. Utah Valley University moved quickly to shut down operations, suspending classes and sealing off parts of the campus as investigators flooded the scene. Students and faculty were left reeling, some traumatized by what they had witnessed, others questioning whether universities can continue to host events that touch raw cultural nerves without enhanced security measures. The sense of fragility was palpable. If a high-profile speaker like Kirk could be gunned down while engaging students, what did that mean for the future of open discourse on campuses? The tension between free expression and physical safety has long simmered in academic environments, but rarely has it been brought into such stark relief. This incident has forced universities, policymakers, and the public to reconsider how we balance the sacred tradition of debate with the sobering reality of violence. Confusion compounded the tragedy in the hours that followed. Conflicting reports circulated about the status of the shooter. Initial word suggested a suspect had been apprehended, but within hours that claim unraveled, leaving law enforcement scrambling to clarify. The uncertainty fueled widespread fear. Was the gunman still at large? Was there more than one? Could this have been part of a coordinated effort? Misinformation spread quickly online, a reflection of both the high-profile nature of the victim and the charged political context surrounding him. The ambiguity highlighted how vulnerable communities become in moments of crisis, when the thirst for information often outpaces the availability of verified facts. For the Kirk family, this uncertainty added insult to unspeakable injury. They were not only grieving the loss of a husband and father but also watching in real time as speculation ran wild. Among the flood of public responses, one stood out for its quiet strength. Kirk's wife, Erica, shared a verse from Psalm 46 verse 1. "The Lord is our refuge and strength, a very present help in times of trouble." The verse resonated widely, capturing both the depth of her personal grief and the faith that anchored her amid the storm. For many, Erica's response was a testament to the resilience of belief in the face of despair. Yet her words also underscored the profound cost of the violence. Erica, barely in her 30s herself, is now left to raise two young children without their father. What was once a vibrant young family with a bright future is now a widow and two children growing up in the shadow of public loss. Their story humanizes what might otherwise be viewed through political lenses. It is not merely about a public figure cut down but about a family shattered, forced to rebuild their lives under the glare of national attention. Kirk's legacy cannot be understood without appreciating the dual strands of his work. On the one hand, he was a political organizer, a conservative commentator who sparred publicly with opponents on issues ranging from free speech to economics to cultural values. But on the other hand, he was also an unapologetic preacher of the Christian gospel. In countless campus appearances, long after the political debates subsided, Kirk would shift to matters of faith, telling students about Christ, redemption, and the hope of eternal life. For his supporters, this side of Kirk was perhaps even more significant than his political activism. They saw in him not just a partisan voice but a messenger of spiritual truth, someone who believed the ultimate answers to society's crises lay not in politics but in faith. The tragedy of his death therefore carries a dual resonance: the silencing of a political provocateur and the loss of a gospel preacher who believed in eternal hope. The fact that Kirk was only 31 when he died makes the loss even more striking. In little more than a decade, he had built a national organization, written books, debated on some of the largest stages in America, and influenced a generation of young conservatives. Yet his youth also meant he had decades of potential leadership ahead. Those who knew him personally often remarked that despite his high-profile platform, he remained devoted to his family. Friends describe him as a husband deeply committed to Erica and a father eager to be present for his children. To consider that two small children will now grow up with only memories, videos, and stories of their father is heartbreaking. The cruelty of the act is not just that it robbed a nation of a prominent voice but that it robbed a family of its center. Adding to the pain is the disturbing trend of online responses that celebrated Kirk's death. In the hours after news of his passing spread, social media platforms lit up with a mix of grief and jubilation. Supporters offered prayers and condolences, while detractors, emboldened by the anonymity of the internet, mocked or cheered his demise. This phenomenon speaks volumes about the state of our public discourse. The ability to celebrate the violent death of an ideological opponent reflects a dehumanization that corrodes the fabric of society. It is one thing to disagree passionately with someone's politics, it is quite another to rejoice when their life is taken. That such reactions exist at all underscores the very environment that allowed an act like this to occur in the first place. Hatred, once confined to rhetoric, increasingly manifests in both digital cruelty and physical violence. As the nation reckons with Kirk's death, leaders across the political and religious spectrum have urged reflection. Some see in his assassination a stark warning about the consequences of unchecked polarization. Others emphasize the biblical perspective Kirk himself often shared, that followers of Christ should expect persecution, even unto death. Still others focus on the need for justice, pressing authorities to bring the perpetrator to account swiftly and decisively. Amid these responses, one theme recurs: the insistence that this tragedy not be allowed to silence voices or deter engagement. Kirk supporters argue that his life demonstrated courage, and that honoring his legacy requires continuing to speak boldly, even when the risks are great. The broader implications of this event ripple far beyond one man's story. It forces a confrontation with the escalating hostility directed at public figures who blend politics and faith. From pastors to politicians, the threats are growing, and the tolerance for disagreement seems to be shrinking. What happened at Utah Valley University is not an isolated anomaly but part of a troubling trajectory in which ideological opponents increasingly view each other not as fellow citizens but as enemies to be eradicated. Historically, moments like these have sometimes galvanized movements, as communities rally around martyrs. Whether Kirk's death will have that effect remains to be seen. What is certain is that his absence leaves a void in both the political and religious conversations of this generation. In the midst of grief, there are lessons to draw. Violent intolerance has silenced a young father and leader, reminding us of the fragility of life and the urgency of compassion. The tragedy highlights the increasing hostility toward public voices, particularly those who bring faith into the public square. Yet faith communities emphasize that even in mourning, there is hope, prayer, and perseverance. Kirk's legacy will be remembered not only for the debates he waged but also for the gospel he preached. And finally, the response to his death, whether in outrage, prayer, or condemnation of those who celebrated, calls society to choose justice, compassion, and dignity over cruelty. The shooting of Charlie Kirk is a watershed moment, one that cannot be dismissed as a random act of violence. It is instead a mirror, reflecting the divisions, hatreds, and choices that define our age. As his family grieves and his supporters remember, the rest of us are left to consider what kind of society we are building, and what kind of society we want to leave for the next generation. In the end, Kirk's life and death compel us to ask whether we will allow violence to dictate the terms of our discourse or whether we will reclaim the courage to engage passionately yet peacefully. The answer to that question will shape the future far more than any single event. For now, may his family find comfort, may justice be done, and may we as a people learn from this profound loss. And if you believe these stories and conversations matter, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe to the channel so we can continue this vital work together.